A very good morning to you on this 12th day of November. It's a Wednesday morning, beautiful weather out here in the Bay. And if you've joined us, you have joined the Fifth Connection, a channel on which we talk you through the storyline of the scriptures. And this morning we are in chapter 5 of Ephesians, and we start in verse number 10. The paragraph going from verse number 7 to verse 14 in Ephesians 5 has to do with living in darkness. It's a terrible thing to live out one's life void of light. In this part of the world, we know what light shedding is all about. And again, great predictions on the horizon of load shedding as we enter into the final month and the high season of this year. And it's quite taxing to live without what we've gotten used to, and that's called artificial lighting. And all of what that does to us. We are seldom even oblivious to the negative impact that artificial light has on us. That we stay awake longer, our eyes take greater strain, and all of what goes with that. But the scriptures talks about the importance of living in the light, walking as children of the light. I took you into some of the backstory in a previous episode on the backdrop to this section. How that in Greek culture, you had the god of light, Phosphorus. Then you had Hesperus, the evening star. Phosphorus was the morning star, the bringer of light. Hesperus, really the bringer of darkness. And in the evening star would appear in the sky. Well, you and I are to live as children of light and produce the products of the luminous. Produce that which light gives. The products of light has to do with a kind of living that is in agreement with the source of all being and living in the fidelity of the flow of reality. What is that? Living in fidelity to the flow of reality means to live in that which is good, right, and true. That's verse number 9. Also, Philippians 4 verse 8, the same idea. There's a well-known Platonic idea, an idea coming from Plato in Greek culture, to give credence to what is good, beautiful, and true. So you can see that the scriptures is written and given against the background of first century culture. You cannot think scientifically about this because science is not the worldview. The worldview is Greco-Roman culture. And for the Jews, it was Second Temple Judaism, which lasted for about 600 years, each one overlapping the other. But for 600 years, this was the background. So do not transport into the text or import into the text and say, well, it doesn't meet up with science. It was not written against the backdrop of science. It was written against Second Temple Judaism and a Greco-Roman background. in the then known world. So now the writer can start out in verse number 10 and say, discern, make every effort to discern. The English text says, try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Well, it's not just about trying, it's about trusting, because discernment has to do with embodying the truth, living out the truth in your life. That is what we call a first-person encounter. Our quick grammar lesson here for those of you who lost touch with your grammar that you learned in high school. You have 6 pronouns. Well, actually more than 6, but you have the first person pronoun, the second person pronoun, and the third person pronoun, and each either appears in the singular mode or in the plural mode, right? I would be first person singular. We would be first person plural. The writer is talking about a first person encounter with truth. What is a first person encounter with truth? It is embodying the truth inside of your life. You are living it. Science and the scientific worldview is listen to me now, don't lose me now, a third person encounter. A third person encounter. It is an he, she, it kind of encounter. They encounter this versus I encounter it. I embody the truth in my life. In science, you don't have to embody the truth. You do an experiment, and then you take what Descartes would call an objective step away from the experiment, and now you observe what has gone down from the outside looking in. Can you see how different the biblical worldview is? It is about first-person encounter, not third-person encounter. It is about embodying the truth, not about disembodied truth, which is what the scientific view is all about. You analyze something to death and you pontificate on your analysis. Well, the scriptures doesn't work like that. You are to live inside of what is really real and embody truth. Live it out. Why do you think people have such a hard time speaking the truth in propositional statements? Oh, they are wonderfully articulate and they have high explanatory power. But you don't see this embodied in their life. They talk the walk, they don't walk the talk. Walking the talk is first-person encounter. Talking the walk is third-person encounter. Now, don't run away from that beautiful way in which grammar works and language works. Because the scripture says here, discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Embody what is pleasing to the appointed one. Who is he? The Lord. Live out the truth in your life. You see, the moment you try to dissect the truth, truth dies. Have you ever tried to keep a frog alive if you have to dissect it in order to study it? The moment you subject it to dissectional analysis, the frog dies. You have to kill it. And we are given to analyzing the text to death, except living out the truth in our lives. Because how do you experience truth? You live inside of it. You don't have the luxury of sitting outside of it. And soos hulle sê in Afrikaans, jy praat jou mond of jou bek vuurwarm. Oh, we are wonderfully good at this as Christians. But followers of the way are to live this thing and not be given to just talking the walk. They are to be walking the talk. Because you see, we are to take no part in verse 11 in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. Expose the works of darkness. Now, 4 times in this paragraph, from verse 7 to verse 14, the word light appears. Luminosity versus darkness versus the absence of light. The scripture says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, because that's what darkness does. Darkness gives rise to futile deeds void of light. There's no light and enlightenment that comes with it or with them. Only darkness and misunderstanding and dumbfoundedness. That's why we have so many numbskulls around. We often talk about don't be dof. Being dof has to do with, it doesn't register on my mental horizon, because I'm partaking in the unfruitful works of darkness. The scripture says those who walk in light have no part in this scenario, but instead they show the performative dissonance of dark living. To live in darkness and to produce unfruitful works is performative dissonance. Or have you tried to play 2 notes on the piano that collide? They are dissonant notes. They don't harmonize. And you play them together and you have a collision of sounds. Well, many believers' lives are like that. Many people's lives are like that. They are like a clanging cymbal. Just clanging. No resonance. No beautiful harmony to it. Just a clanging, dull and dead sound. You and I, when we live right, our lives already show and expose performative dissonance. It shows dark living up for what it is. That's why darkness and light cannot exist in the same space. Try to have light and dark in the same room or in the same box. It doesn't work. Because light dispels darkness, and the darkness, John chapter 1 says, comprehendeth it not. The darkness did not overcome the light, because the Logos in verse 1 of John 1 is the light in verse number 9, which lighteth every man that comes into the world. Now you have to try getting your head around that one. But this light and dark theme that rises in the text needs to be understood against the backdrop of the culture. And how did the culture or the first century audience understand this? Paul says, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, their futile deeds. There's a disconnect between futile deeds void of light. They are a performative dissonance. They're like a clanging cymbal. They don't go anywhere. But they will infect a person's life, a family's life, a culture's life, a nation's life. Today you're going to have opportunities to embody truth, to discern, to understand what is really real and pleasing to the Lord, and exposing the rot and the dirt and the darkness of life based upon how you live and based upon where you walk. Don't let your talk louder than your walk talks. Let your walk talk louder than your talk talks. You are to be on the lookout today for opportunities to live inside of what is really real. Don't sleepwalk through the day. Be on the lookout for opportunities to trust God and to obey Him. Goodbye for now.